So today we have the incredible Shruti Kapoor, who is going to be talking to us about AI-powered web apps. So she's an adept educator, having taught courses in JavaScript, React, GraphQL, and front-end development. As an egghead instructor, she is dedicated to sharing her knowledge and expertise. She has a passion for dev jokes, painting, hiking, traveling, doesn't know swimming, but has no problem snorkeling with whale sharks, so will jump out of a moving plane with a parachute. That's a very cool fact. Thank you so much, Shruti. And a round of applause, everyone.
Woo! Oh,
All right, let's do this AV dance. Play. First time. All right. Thank you. Let me make sure the clicker is working, if this is the clicker. No, that's not what I want. OK, where is my talk? One of these. It's good I'm the first speaker, so I can do this for everyone. Keynote. OK, this one. Yes. OK. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. Some of you are caffeinated. Some of you have had 3 coffees. Some of you are hungover from last night. I'm none of those. However, my parents are here. So be nice. Today, I'm going to be talking about building AI web apps. Yes, OK. Let me move this here so I'm not doing this dance every time. All right, so I want to quickly introduce myself before I get started. My name is Shruti Kapoor. I'm a front-end engineer at Slack. I've been working at Slack for over a year, and I work at Slack as an accessibility engineer. So what's an accessibility engineer doing here talking about AI? I'll talk about it in a minute. But I feel like being in front-end is such a hard job because things are changing every day. Your company is still using React 16, but React 18 is out, and apparently there's something called React Server Components, and somebody's going to do a talk about building a whole framework. There's like so much happening, and I think today you will learn as well that it's so hard to keep up as a front-end engineer, and I totally understand that. So this year, I'm on a mission to make front-end development easier for everyone, one tutorial at a time. Hopefully, the lights are not too bright. OK, that's working. You can find me online anywhere at ShrutiKapoor08 with that handle, or you can scan my face, not this one, that one, to get access to my website. If you've been to any of my talks, or if you know anything about me, you know what's coming up next. Dev jokes! All right, so the way this works is I'll ask a question, and you can yell the answer out loud. Doesn't have to be right, just anything works. Nerdier, the better. What do you get when you cross a machine learning model with a comedian? Did you say bad jokes? A chatbot with a sense of humor. OK. Why was there no food at the developer conference? It was a serverless event. What accommodation did the JavaScript developer request at the hotel? Somebody said something. Angular? Actually, that's a good one. A room with a view. OK, if you want more dev jokes, You can find me on Twitter. So why are we doing this talk? By a show of hands, I want to ask you, how many of you are scared that AI will someday take over your job? Or have been scared that someday AI will take over your job? Yes, 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 yes. I felt that too. My biggest fear is AI doing coding and front-end developers not being needed anymore. That's my biggest fear. I feel like no-code tools kind of doesn't help, because if a website can be built by a no-code tool, why am I needed? So when AI came out and ChatGPT came out, I freaked out a little. And I felt like I had to quickly catch up and level up my skills, or else I will be replaced by AI. And it didn't help, actually, when a lot of content writers and copywriters' job was replaced by ChatGPT. So I feel like when a new tech comes out, everybody kind of goes through this kind of like phases of adoption. And I call this phases of adoption, the first stage being fear. Like, holy shit, my job is not going to be there anymore. Second is kind of denial, like, oh, my job is going to be fine. It can never replace my job. I'm irreplaceable. My skills cannot be done by a program. I used to be there, too. Phase 3 is FOMO, like, everybody's doing this job. Everybody's becoming an AI developer. I guess I need to catch up, too. Jobs are being replaced. What can I do? Phase 4 is adoption, when you kind of understand, when you kind of become mature and you're like, OK, I can learn this. I need to adopt this. What can I do to become more up-leveled? And phase 5 is being a pro. When you become so good that you have no fear left, nothing can stop you, you're giving conference talks, writing blog posts, getting paid as an AI engineer, you're a pro. I'm not there yet. Today, my goal is to take you to phase 4, which is adoption, and help you understand how to become AI friendly, or how to make an AI web app, so that one day you can give a finger to AI bot. That's Midjourney's way of showing the bird, flipping the bird. Disclaimer, I am not an expert. I'm not an ML engineer. I'm definitely not a data scientist. And I am definitely not getting paid as an AI engineer. So with that, let's talk about how to build a web app with LangChain and OpenAI. So in this talk, I'm going to briefly talk about these 3 things. I'll talk about a glossary of common AI terms you may have heard, like model, token, prompt, LLMs. And then we'll look at a demo of how to build a web app with AI. And then I'll give you a brief path forward on what you can do if this talk inspires you and how you can take it to the next step. So let's talk about some AI keywords, but in an explain like a 5 kind of sense. Because I feel like it's really complicated, but if you break it down and kind of understand in an easy way, it helps. So large language model, first of all. To explain this, I want to talk about a brief story. This is my little brother 15 years ago. So I feel like to understand LLMs, it kind of helps to think of a big sister. Let's say you have a big sister who loves you a lot, and you are like in grade 1 or grade 2, and she's there to help you understand all of the topics. You ask her a question, she answers it back for you. So she's kind of your go-to resource. She's the person you go for to ask for any advice, any questions, to understand anything, and she breaks it down into simple topics. But guess what? She only has access to local library or her local school, so her knowledge is only as good as the school that she goes to. Your sister is the LLM, large language model. So what is a large language model in technical sense? LLM, basically that stands for large language model, is a natural language processing model, which is the reason why prompts are kind of written in in plain English sense. These natural language processing models are based on deep learning techniques, particularly transformer architecture. And you can use an LLM to ask questions, generate text, create images. The large in large language model represents the number of parameters the language model can change autonomously as it learns. Just like the big sister from example, who's learned from various sources and libraries across the world, LLMs are trained on various and millions of data sources called data sets. which are like text from the internet, books, articles, data sources. This helps the language to understand the patterns of human language so that when you ask it a question, it can predict what the next answer is going to be. So if you say a cat and the LLM will understand the next probable word could be dog. Speaking of which, prompts. So prompts are kind of like you tell your sister or you ask her, what is XXX? Or you tell her, let's do XXX. So you are giving her a command or an instruction to do something, or you're asking her something. That is a prompt. In computers, a prompt is kind of like a command that you give to the computer that helps it understand the operation that needs to be done. So it's like a special instruction. You may recognize prompts if you've used ChatGPT, and it could be something like find the bug in this code, and then you paste the code. So the program is able to understand the difference between the instruction, find the bug in this code, and the code itself. And that is a prompt. Writing prompts is actually a really complicated topic, and there's a whole engineering that's called prompt engineering. Today, we're going to look into it briefly on how to create good prompts and how to use one prompt to kind of pipe into another prompt. The next bit you might hear often is tokens. And token is kind of important because the more tokens you use, the more money you end up paying. So token is kind of like you ask your sister for a story. And your sister breaks it down into small segments to help you understand. So that small segment, or that small story, is a token. So in AI, token is a small, meaningful block of information. And it's a basic unit that LLM can use to process and generate language. An example of a token is, let's say there's a sentence called the cat is sleeping. It could be divided into 4 tokens. The cat is sleeping. So basically, a token is a small unit or a piece of text that a computer program uses to understand and work with language. All right, so building a web app. There's a few questions I had in mind when I wanted to build a web app. Because there's so much information on AI, especially in Python, I wanted to kind of narrow it down into how I can use that to create a web app. So the first question that I asked myself is where to start. And I want to give these answers away to you so you don't have to look for them. OpenAI is a great way to start. The resources are great. There's great APIs, easily accessible, lots of resources lots of folks that are already doing tutorials. OpenAI is a great place to start. Which language to use? We didn't come to React conference to do a Python talk, so we're going to use JavaScript. Which framework to use? There's a lot of frameworks out there, but I recommend using LangChain. It's one of the biggest frameworks. It helps you kind of integrate with JavaScript very easily. All of the APIs are easily available, updated regularly. Highly recommend LangChain. And we're actually going to use LangChain today to build a web app. And finally, one question that I ask myself a lot is, do I need to train models, and how do I do that? And the answer is no. You don't need to train models, at least not to get started. And the next question that I had is, how much will it cost to build an AI web app? Because I heard OpenAI you have to pay for. And the answer is however much you got. If you got tons, you can send them all your money and build a really cool AI app. But it's up to you. OK, now let's talk about building the web app. So I think you're all familiar with the front-end and back-end component. Front-end referred with pink, back-end because that's how I imagine folks their soul being really dark. But I think you're all kind of familiar with that. So I'm going to use that terminology. Front-end is where the user will put in their input. That's where they'll pass the prompt in. Then you'll send it over to the back-end, which is where you'll do the processing. And this is where your AI app comes in. Your AI service comes in. So what you'll do is you'll create your AI service. And you'll see this in the demo as well. We'll create the AI service that will then send the response over to our backend API, which then sends it over to the front-end API. So front-end sits at the top. OK, integrating with OpenAI and LangChain is actually straightforward. All you have to do is sign up for a dev account, get your API key, give them all your money you got, and you're set. Setting up LangChain is also super easy, just an npm module, npm install, and then import OpenAI from LangChain. Super easy to set up. Importing an LLM also requires you to pass your dev key, your OpenAPI key, OpenAI key. So this is where you'll pass in. And before we look into the examples or the demo itself, I want to talk about fundamental blocks of an AI service. And we'll look into this a little bit, so I want to give a little brief introduction of this. So prompts, as we talked about, is the way we pass in the data to our API. And it's a style of creating inputs that LLM can understand. We can format it in a way we like. Models is how we'll use to actually do any operation, ask it a question, generate a text, things like that. And parser is how you take the information that comes back from the model and digest it in a way that your web app understands. So parser, you can think of it as something that takes the output from the LLM API, maybe puts it in a string format or a JSON format or a number format. So that's basically the building blocks of building an AI web app. You have a prompt template, which you'll create. You pass it to your LLM model, which then does some operation on it, and then you'll send it over to an output parser. And that output then goes to your web app. All right, let's do the demo. Where is my cursor? OK, display settings. Mirror display. And I think I have to use resolution now. 1080. Yes, cool. OK, so let me show you what the app actually looks like. So, all right, this is it. This is our app, basically. So the inspiration behind this app is my husband and I were looking to buy our first house together in Seattle. So I thought, why not use an AI app to do that? Because we have no better things to do. So here's the front end of that app. Basically, what we do is enter a prompt in here. I can say I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, single-family house in Seattle. I click search, and then I'm going to pass in this string to the LLM API. And it's going to do the job of actually parsing that string input, searching Zillow API, which is a real estate API in the US, and give me back listings that match my criteria. I can extend the LLM API to do anything that I want. So for example, I can say, I need 3-bedroom house with a backyard, with a front yard, with, I don't know, like a fountain in like $1 million. You're not going to be able to find anything, but you can dream. So that's the front end. It's super simple. As you can see, it's just an input box and a submit button. And I'll show you what the code looks like. I cheated a bit and did not use React, so I'm using just JavaScript. Because why not, a challenge. It's super simple, a text area that accepts a placeholder and an input, a button that submits, and basically a div where we're going to put our properties, which is when we fetch it from the LLM API. So what we do is when we submit event handler, all we do is call an endpoint called parse properties, which is going to do the job of calling the LLM API and calling the Zillow API after we fetch from LLM. And then all I do is post that data back to my web app and send it as a list. Super simple. Let's look at the back end. So when we submit, we send it to parse properties. Is this legible? OK, cool. We send it to parse properties. And what it does is it takes the requirements out of the post or the information that you send, which is just a string. And then it sends it over to the LLM API, which is what we'll look into in a minute. And then all I do is I'm taking out 3 parameters from it. Price ending, which is kind of like however much I want to look for. So like starting $1 million to $2 million, $5 million, and the number of bedrooms. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just taking out 3 inputs, but you can take out however much you want. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch properties, which is how I call the Zillow API. And that's basically it. So before we dive into the LLM API, I told you I'll show you a little bit about prompt engineering. So this is the point where we'll do that. And this is how you can set up your AI service. So we talked about setting up OpenAI from LangChain, importing it. This is how we do it. We'll call OpenAPI and send our API key. And that's all you need to do to set it up. So let's look at the first example. In the first example, I'll show you how to create a chain, which is how you can pass prompts into LLM and keep it open for receiving more inputs, and then call the model to receive data back. So the first thing we're going to do is create a prompt. And we use something called prompt template, which basically just helps us create prompts. You don't have to worry about it. Basically, we're going to use prompt template. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell AI that we are starting a new company, and we need to create a new name for a startup. So the product itself, we are not going to specify it right now, but we're going to put that in. We're going to pass that in when we call the API. And so we're going to call that product. Then we're going to chain it. We're going to pipe our LLM. LLM is the model that we're going to use. And we're going to pass it to our prompt. And then for the result, all we need to do is invoke the chain with the parameter that we are expecting to pass in. So here, I'm going to say real estate listings, because that's the product I'm building. But you can pass something like fashion design, because why not? And if I save that, it will create a new name for an app, Fashion AI Design. So that's number one, which is how to create a prompt template and how to pass it to the chain, to LLM, and to how to invoke an LLM. Next step, let's make it a little bit more smarter. And what we're going to do is create two prompt templates, pass the input that comes back, or the output that comes back from one to another to show you how chaining works. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that I'm looking for a job, and I'm looking for a job in a certain number of cities. So respond back to me with the city that works really well for their job. So for example, if I'm a software engineer, you can expect an answer to be London or New York or San Francisco in US. So you're passing in that question or that prompt to LLM, and you're saying, what are the 3 most preferred cities in the world for a person working as a job, which is the input parameter, and only respond with the name of the cities. And now what we're going to do is use the output that comes back from there and pass it to our next prompt, which is I'm going to say you're starting a new AI startup, thinking of a name, and suggest good names for startup that is used to create that product from our example first in that city. So we're going to use the input that comes from here and pass it down to here. And include the name of the city in the name just so we know that you're doing the right job. So this is how we chain. We're going to pass the prompt 1 and pipe it with the next, with an output parser, which is how we're telling LLM to convert it into a string. And then we're going to use the city that comes back from the first chain, which is this prompt, what are the 3 most preferred cities, and pass it to the next prompt, which is when we are asking how to, when we're asking LLM to create a product in that city. So we got the chain, we took city out of that chain, and we're passing it to the next chain. And then all we're going to do is invoke. But there's 2 input parameters that it was expecting us to pass, the job and product, so we're going to pass that here. So I'm going to say I'm a fashion designer, and I'm looking to create a product of wedding outfits. And if I run that and save it, it keeps thinking. Keeps thinking. Maybe I ran out of money. Keeps thinking. Maybe we restarted. Am I not console logging? I am console logging. OK, let's start this. Suggest a name, maybe that made it crazy. There we go. OK, sometimes it goes crazy. Thank you. So we asked it to create, we asked it a question, what are the 3 most preferred cities? And then we said that we're going to use that city from the previous prompt, and then pass it down to the next question, which is create a startup from that city. So now it gave us back London AI bridal creations, Paris AI weddings, and NYC AI wedding couture. So it's kind of understanding that I need to take input from the first prompt and pass it on to the second prompt. And so that's how to pipe 2 different prompts. So now let's look at how to build the app that we were working on. I'm going to comment this out. OK, so now we're going to look at something called Zod schema, which is basically just a way to tell LLM or the API to create JSON outputs. And we're telling it that we're going to pass it an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that I need a price ending, which is a string. And it's basically the ending price of budget. And if it's not passed, then send 0. And then same way, I'm going to say price starting, which is the starting price of my budget, and return 0 if not passed. So I'm just passing in simple prompts as strings. And then bedrooms is the number of bedrooms. Now, what I'm going to tell it is that I'm going to pass you a description, or I'm going to pass you a string in from my web app, which is what I'm telling it here, parse the description provided by user, and extract information about real estate preferences. And how does it know how to do that? Because I gave it these descriptions. So it's going to look at these descriptions and try to parse the language that I send in, or the input that I send in, into these parameters. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke it, chain.invoke, and it expects 2 parameters, the description, which is what comes from my web app, and the format instructions, which is kind of like the prompt, but it's coming from here. All right, so now let's try this. I already have a description written, and I'm going to say I'm looking for a house in the range of 900K to 1.2 million, needs to have 3 bedrooms. Now, what I expect it to do is give me price ending, price starting, and 3 bedrooms. All right, where is my app? Here it is. OK, if everything is working as expected, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to start my app, which is node-mon server.js. Demo gods be good. OK, so I'm going to say looking for a house in the range of 900K to 1.2, needs to have 3 bedrooms. Now, what I expect it to do is at least give me a JSON with requirements that I asked it, bedrooms, and the price ending and price start. So if I click search, it should send it over here. OK, so I got price ending, price starting, and bedroom. So I was able to parse my natural language into a digestible JSON structure. Now, what I'm going to do is send this data over to my Zillow API, which is going to basically fetch properties in that, requirements. And it did that. Yay! And not only that, it actually gave me 40 different properties. So this is a really cool way to kind of like send or like use natural language to actually do something meaningful, and you don't have to like go through all of the filters. Just a really cool web app. I don't know if I'll make a startup out of it, but at least it's good to build. One thing that I would really like to do as a next step for me is how can I tell AI that I like this house and find more houses like this, kind of like how Netflix does it. And that's called a recommendation engine, and there's a way for LLM to do that as well, which is going to be my next talk. So stay tuned. All right, I know that I'm over time, so I'm going to really quickly go through the rest of the slides. Play. All right, so path forward for you, if this inspires you, is there's actually like 4 different AI apps categories that people are building right now. Companionship, which is kind of like help me do this, or like help me write, or help me stay accountable. Question answering, like what is the capital of France? Utility, like use everything that's posted in Twitter today to create a summary, so kind of like summarization, which helps LLM to kind of you pass in a data to an LLM and help it, let it do some form of function for you. And the final one is creativity, like inspire me to create art projects, or give me an inspiration to create, I don't know, like a web app, or a tutorial, or like what is a good newsletter to send in this area, in this time. Where to start? like I mentioned before, OpenAI is a great place. They have really good examples and really good tutorials. So I would recommend OpenAI to get started. Even better than OpenAI's documentation, I really like this tutorial from Deep Learning, which is LangChain for LLM application development. The first module itself is about prompts and models, which kind of helped frame this talk. So big shout out to them. Now it's your turn to build an AI web app. We need you. It's actually a lot easier to get started than I imagined. All you need to do is create your API, OpenAPI key, call the LLM, which is going to be OpenAI, use LangChain as a JavaScript developer, and invoke a chain. Super easy to get started. I hope this presentation was helpful. And this is what we talked about today. We talked about some glossary items. We talked about models, tokens, and prompts. And we talked about building a web app, the demo, and the path forward. Don't worry about taking photos. I'll send the link to presentation and the demo later in Discord as well. I will also be posting some easy tutorials on how to understand LLM and tokens, because I feel like it's very hard to understand that. You can scan that QR code for that. My goal this year is to fill that bar, the bottom bar, and you can help me get there. And finally, thank you so much for coming. But before I go, one more dev joke. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. Love the dev jokes. Man, I really need to